All mothers want to have a positive influence on their children. And sometimes that strong desire to really influence them, to support them to be the best they can be in the world, can actually get in the way of the kind of influence we want to have on our children. So this video is about 3 ways to influence your children without using force and also without projecting onto them.
And in a way that it will actually be received.
And be effective. The first practice and point we want to make is around expectations and assumptions and making them consciously.
We recently heard of a study that was done that pertains to this point, so we're going to bring it up here. And basically the study was done by a psychologist in the US, and he went into a school and he went to 3 different classroom teachers, and he told them that 3 students in the year had sat tests that had proven that they were exceptional, gifted students across the board in all areas. And he said to them, don't mention this to the students, just keep this to yourself, but we just want to let you know that these 3 students are exceptionally gifted. Which was all made up. They didn't actually take any of the tests. This was just a scenario he put in place. There was no tests.
We picked those students at random, like out of a hat.
So the point of it was that as the term commenced and the school year went on, time and time again, without the teachers saying anything, those 3 students came top of the year over and over again and excelled over and over again in all their results.
And they hadn't actually beforehand.
No.
So the results of that test were that those teachers internally having that expectation of those students created that result. So their expectations were so powerful that they actually affected the actions of the students. So bringing that into you as a mother with your children and you influencing your children, it's so important to look at the expectations and the assumptions you have on your children in the moment. And generally our expectations and our assumptions are affected by all the other moments we remember our children being in. So for example, if your 4-year-old has been hitting other children a lot lately, you're probably going to go into a situation like when you go to the park expecting that they might be hitting someone.
Worrying about it. It's very fear-driven.
Assuming it. And that expectation, that assumption, is likely to create that outcome. So what we're pointing out here is that it's so important to be aware of your expectations because they actually create outcomes. And the solution we're suggesting is to come back to assuming best intent.
And you may have heard that before, because it's a bit of a catchphrase, but we really want you to step outside of the catchphrase aspect of it and actually come back to really truly assuming best intent. So how do we do that? Coming back to the belief that your child is a good person and is doing the best that they can with what they have in the moment. So really making that assumption that they're a whole, complete, loving child who is doing the absolute best that they can.
Together with assuming best intent is also assuming that anything is possible in this moment. Like, I don't need to have that assumption that they might be this way. I also don't need to create a whole other assumption that is very specific that I might get let down upon if then they don't do it. It's more, anything is possible, and I assume best intent, and that's the energy I'm going into this moment with.
So the second piece around influence is the way that you choose to give feedback. And the way that we're going to suggest that you do it in this video is around the concept of acknowledging what they're doing right, what's going well, acknowledging the times when, no matter how small it was a step in the right direction.
Acknowledging when they're serving you and the other people, and when they're choosing actions that actually benefit everybody.
So quite often we don't acknowledge those moments. We don't physically go to them and acknowledge them. I really noticed how you did this and I really appreciate it. And we want to be clear here that this is not about praise. This is not about trying to control or manipulate the situation. And this is not about this good boy, good girl type scenario.
It's not about praise, it's about focusing on what you actually want and what actually serves everybody, rather than focusing on the behaviour that you want to get rid of. Because generally if there's something that's really bothering you, like for example the hitting that we mentioned before, your focus will be on when they are hitting someone and making sure that stops, and then therefore giving the feedback around that hitting was wrong, that did this, that did that, that hurt them, don't do that, do something else, and focusing on when they actually did that thing that you don't want them to do. And in essence, in those situations, you're focusing on what you don't want, and the focus on what you don't want amplifies what you don't want. So instead we're talking about focusing on what is working, on what you're appreciating. So bring your feedback in a whole different way to where, even if it's a small moment, to those moments when, say, they hold back, they don't hit, or the moments when they say something really special to someone else, those moments when they come and give you a hug, those moments when they help you out.
The more you focus on acknowledging those, then the more they'll grow. So for example, the first time my daughter made me a cup of tea, I really acknowledged it and I was really grateful for it, and not with the intent to control her and get her to make me cups of tea all the time, but just my heartfelt appreciation. Thank you so much. I love that you made me a cup of tea, and acknowledging that cup of tea. And the outcome of that was, for the next week or so, I got endless cups of tea coming at me, and even now, years later, I still get cups of tea. So that acknowledging what you want more of is the key to being influential in that situation. The third way to be influential is to make sure that you're really clear on what's going on in the situation before you try to be influential. And an example of this is to not overlay your stuff or your story on top of your child. And I'll give you another example on this one. So let's say your child is facing a disappointment, or they're feeling sad. Something has ended that they didn't want to end, or their friend has moved away, or something has happened. And often we're coming from a place of empathy, trying to understand what they might be feeling so we can support them, so that we can help them. We need to check in and really find out what they're feeling before we can effectively do that. So we might assume that our child feels really sad, feels rejected, feels lonely. We make all those assumptions, and if we try to influence from that place of assumption, what we can end up doing is overlaying that story onto our child, and they believe, oh, I should be feeling that.
Which is influential, but it actually is creating a whole load of other troubles that they didn't even have in the first place.
That they didn't necessarily have.
So we're projecting our shit onto them.
Yeah. Okay, so you don't want to do that. And also, you can, if you come from that place and you don't check in first, then sometimes you just can't be influential at all, because from their perspective, you're just talking nonsense, because that's not actually the story that's going on for them. So to be really influential, you need to be really clear on what is really going on. And the way that you do that is you check in with your child. You get them talking about how they're feeling. How did that impact them? What are they thinking? Because until you have that information, it's difficult to be influential and helpful and supportive.
So take any one of those 3 tips, being aware of your expectations because they create outcomes, and focusing on what you appreciate, giving feedback from that space, and checking in with them to ensure that you're not projecting your story onto them. Okay, and enjoy. Bye. Alright.
This coffee is very cold.
Yeah, that was probably enough. After that bit, I think. Okay.
Okay, so we're finished?
Yeah.
Okay.